the stress of everything. It's like getting to me.
Well, what you're feeling and everything, I mean, considering everything that we have going on, it's understandable. So it's okay to feel how you feel.
Let's talk about some green flags. We talk about so many red flags with these other couples. I'm super excited to just talk about some green flags. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Yates, Anya Bwile, Steph Anya for short, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today, I'm going to be breaking down everything that we saw unfold in season 4 of Love is Blind with Brett and Tiffany. If you're curious, stay tuned. What's on your mind? Now first, as always, I have to give a spoiler warning. If you don't want to know who ends up together, who doesn't, finish the show and come back. And my disclaimer that I have not met any of these people personally. I am going based on edited content with these analyses. So there's probably so much that we've missed, and our interpretations of these people are very much influenced by the narratives that the show produces for the audience. So even though I am a licensed therapist, I am not an expert in these people's lives. My purpose with these analyses is to give you examples of what certain dynamics may look like in your life. And in this video in particular, we'll be focusing on all of the good examples of communication and validation that made this the best couple to come out of Love is Blind, in my opinion. Let's talk about first impressions. My first impression with Brett and Tiffany on that date that we first saw in the first episode, I loved it when Brett said,
I'm here for a reason. I'm here for a purpose.
This is something that a lot of us overlook in the dating process. We're going based on vibes, how someone makes us feel. We're thinking about a future, but we're not necessarily speaking directly about that future that we're envisioning. Many of us are scared. If I get too serious too quickly, this person might run away. And that is something that you need to know right away if you're looking for something substantial. If you're looking for a significant relationship, you need to be saying these things up front. So dating with intention is something I'm very big on. Whenever my clients come to me and they say, I've just met this person, and I'm immediately asking them, well, what are you wanting with this person ultimately? And they're like, oh, well, I don't really want to talk about that. But then here we are 2 years later talking about all the wasted time and the heartbreak, because realistically you did have a vision. You just didn't want to admit that to yourself. So that was a very good first impression of Brett. One thing that I think a lot of us noticed very early on with Brett and Tiffany is their age. One of the most common critiques with Love is Blind is that when you cast really young people, not to say that you can't be young and serious about finding love, but there is this bigger awareness of opportunity. And so for Brett and Tiffany, they have more experience with dating. Both of them admit to not having many long-term relationships. I think both of them said that their longest relationships were over a decade ago. So they have more clarity around what they are looking for, and they seem to be more serious about getting married. I will admit, I remember thinking she just seemed too good to be true. I was like, this woman is beautiful and caring, and she seems so empathetic. And that is my own distorted, messed up thinking. And that's how so many of us approach dating as well. You think to yourself, this person is too good to be true, and you start looking for the things that's wrong with them to make sense of why they're single. Now, that's not to say that we don't all come with our flaws, our historical patterns that have led to why our relationships didn't work out. But when we go in looking for what's going to be wrong, we're often going to find something. The thing about Tiffany is she wears her emotions on her sleeve. So just seeing that, I was like, oh, how are her emotional regulation skills? I was thinking, oh, this might be the kind of person that's really sweet, but then when you cross them, they blow up and get upset. I see that sometimes for people who are very emotional. You see the extremes on both sides. Those were my initial impressions. Things like validation. This is something we saw with them so early on in the pods. One of my favorite dates with Brett and Tiffany is when Brett is sharing his story about his brother. And if you don't know, his brother passed away unexpectedly when he was engaged. So the family was planning to get together for a wedding soon, and they ended up having to get together for a funeral. And Brett talks about how this made him extremely aware of his mortality. What I was taking from that is it both motivates him to not waste time, but also I think it makes him very hesitant about making choices, because there's always that worry of how this is going to affect you if you only have so much life to live. And I love Tiffany's response to him was,
Your reservations and your feelings are valid. Like, period.
She did not try to convince him that that's a freak accident. You don't have to worry. That's not going to happen to you. What she said is that your reservations are valid, and the only thing I can do is hope I can love you in the way I feel that you deserve. Absolutely loved that. You could tell she was a very caring person. When I see other people crying in relation to things that have nothing to do with them or with people that they barely know, I'm always in awe of their ability to connect with those emotions and express them in that way. And so I remember thinking that was such a sweet moment. The fact that part of his motivation and moving forward with having a partner, a lifelong partner, is seeing how short life can be. And I thought that Tiffany held such a lovely space for him during that moment. They both showed an openness to being verbally affirming and also validating. So those are obviously some green flags. The very fact that Brett was willing to share that story, you could see he was becoming emotional, and he was also relating it to how it could affect him now and possibly them going forward. That is another green flag. They were focusing on sharing their story. They weren't just focusing on the competition of the other people they were interested in. They weren't just focusing on this glamorized life they saw together, just using each other as a way of getting to a life that they want. They also took the time to reflect on their history and being honest about how that history is affecting their present. One thing about Tiffany is that people might not recognize that a lot of the things that she's being open and authentic about are things that for a lot of men can be a turnoff, right? This is something that I have seen and worked with when I'm working with men individually and working with them in a couple setting, is that she talks about being very persistent, liking to break the expectations. She even says in band she didn't want to play flute because that was too girly of an instrument for her. So she is very committed to breaking barriers and being ambitious. And Brett tells her,
the satisfaction that you get from people doubting you.
Yeah.
Like, I love that. Because I think I have a similar mentality.
there are a lot of people who are not attracted to that. That is actually a turnoff for them. So her being able to be open and authentic, and she says, I want someone where I don't have to change myself to be with them. And I love that she found someone who can not only tolerate it, but celebrate that side of her. So they were so affirming, so open and emotionally vulnerable. And I even love that Tiffany didn't care about being the first person to say she's falling in love with Brett either.
I already feel as though I'm in love with you.
That is a risk in and of itself, and something that a lot of people, particularly women in heteronormative situations, avoid because they don't want to be the person who's developing feelings before it's been confirmed by the person that they're with. And I do understand that logic. It's a terrible feeling to put yourself out there and feel rejected. And in that moment, a lot of us were perceiving Brett's response as a form of rejection, right? Because Tiffany says, I'm falling in love with you, and Brett ultimately says,
You are special, Tiffany.
and then she falls asleep. And I thought, hey, she's probably pretending to be asleep because she feels rejected in this moment. In the reunion, she clarifies that she just felt such a relief from being able to just share this thing that she'd already been feeling for days, that it soothed her, rocked her to sleep. So I just love that. And I was kind of disappointed that Brett immediately jumped to being like, I'm done because of that. And I understand that because he felt like he was being vulnerable and telling her about how the word love wasn't really used much growing up. I'm sure that was not something he shares often. And he might have felt like he was abandoned emotionally in that moment. So I definitely understood it. Now, in the next episode, it's so crazy because you go from this drama of Tiffany falling asleep and Brett saying I'm done to literally they have on their proposal clothes in the next pod date. And I'm always like, how do they know to dress up for the proposals? Like someone is telling them, oh, this is your proposal day, so get dressed up. They were able to talk through it and not hold it against each other. And this is something I work with my couples a lot on, is conflict, tension. These are things that will naturally occur when you're doing life with someone, whether that's a roommate, whether that's family, whether that's a romantic partner, friend. Things will come up where you get frustrated, where you get disappointed, where you might be questioning if you even know this person. What's a good marker of health in your relationship is not completely avoiding that. That's unrealistic for the most part. What's a good marker of health in your relationship is how quickly you're able to rebound from it. Do you have the tools to look within yourself and communicate to your partner why something was triggering to you or bothered you? And do you have the capacity to hear your partner's perspective, reflect that back to them to make sure you're getting it right, and then make a plan for moving forward. So the fact that Brett was open to hearing what happened with Tiffany, I love what he said when he said,
I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a small moment and a funny story of our journey together.
that is another green flag when you're able to think ahead, use forward thinking capabilities so that you are not focused on how big something feels in the moment. So small moments like that, is that really enough of a reason for you all to break up? I can't tell you how many times I see couples who are talking to me about the potential of divorce. And when I try to get back to the moment when things change, at what point did it start shifting from this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with to this is a person I can't spend another year with? A lot of times these small things start adding up. So often they can't even put their finger on the moments when things started to change. And it could be something as simple as this, right? You don't want to say, I was opening up emotionally and I felt emotionally abandoned by them because they fell asleep on me while I was talking to them. That feels petty, right? So you say things like, they don't really care about me, or they don't pay attention, they're aloof. You start making huge statements for small incidents, and it's extremely important to think long term. Take a step back. Could this ultimately just be a great part of your story? Something that you guys can look back on, laugh about, something that in another 6 months is something that you can now more easily work through or navigate. So I loved in that moment that he was able to think ahead and say, hey, yesterday I was really, really hurt by this, but ultimately this is a very small blip in a lifetime that I'm targeting with this person. I loved the moment when they were in Mexico and Brett says to her, I had this feeling that everybody around you is happier because of you. I'm like, is there anything sweeter that could possibly be said? The thing that I love about how Brett talks to Tiffany is that he talks so much more about her spirit and her energy than her looks. I think Tiffany's absolutely stunning, so gorgeous. He validates that as well. But the way that he speaks life into her and that he sees her as this amazing person, what's really good is that I know Tiffany sees that in herself. That is the difference between a codependent relationship and an interdependent relationship. Tiffany even said to him in the pod, she was like, I know I'm great, but I think I could be better with you. Some people have such low self-esteem that hearing another person speak that confidently about themselves is actually interpreted as arrogance. But it's actually confidence, right? Because she's still kind and she still sees greatness in others as well. It's just that she's also not ignorant to her own greatness. And so she believes in herself. And so when Brett is saying these sweet things to her, it definitely has an effect because she respects his opinion, but her self-worth is not dependent on his validation. This is very important in relationships because there are going to be times where our partner does not have the perfect words. They might say the wrong thing, right? And think they're saying the right thing. If your view of self is completely dependent on what they say to you, how they feel about you, that's extremely unstable. I love that she's able to receive these things. And even when she doesn't have the right words to say back, she can say to him,
I'm sorry, I'm speechless.
she's able to say, hey, I'm not leaving you hanging. I'm speechless. Your words touched me. You matter. What you have to say matters to me. So the communication with these two is always like, this is like my breath of fresh air. After watching all of the terrible communication and dysfunction, it's so good to just relax when they're on screen. Now, sometimes I will admit with Brett and Tiffany, when they're all over each other and making out and stuff, I don't know, it feels like watching my parents. I'm like, okay, camera, stop now. I can watch sexual content, I can read smut, but something about these two is just so pure. I just don't want to see that. So let's talk about meeting friends and family. Obviously, the meeting with Brett and Tiffany's friends was such a good meeting. You can tell a lot about a person by the friends that they have, what they say about her and how they respond, how do they treat people. It's a reflection of the type of qualities they value in a friend. So Brett is giving Tiffany a lot of love and verbal affirmation, and you can see she is accustomed to that. Her friends give her that as well. She has a high high view of herself she talks about. In the real, she was like, I was looking bomb.
I was looking bomb.
She's not afraid to speak positively about herself, and she has friends who do the same. She's got that emotional bond with those ladies, and you can see even in the lounge, she had a connection with those women as well. So that is a great reflection of who you are. What do your relationships look like even outside of this romantic relationship? Also, because there are going to be times where you are going to need support outside of that relationship, and when someone feels like they are your entire social circle, your entire world, that's so much pressure. I loved to meet her friends. I thought they were asking him some great questions and they were being kind to him, but it's okay to evaluate. This is a very bizarre situation, but I like that it didn't seem like they were being mean. When they asked Brett what he loved about Tiffany, the first thing he said was her authenticity. So I did love again that he was talking about her personal characteristics. I just think that it is something to pay attention to, is how much are you loving this person for who they are, and how much are you loving this person for how they make you feel about yourself. I do think that Brett clearly has a lot of respect for who Tiffany is as a person. Now, when Tiffany meets Brett's friends, very similar vibe. The friends are supportive. You can tell some of them are evaluating, like this is a very bizarre situation. They comment on how they look at each other. Tiffany sharing a little bit more about why she loves Brett. She appreciates the fact that he understands struggle, but is still pushing forward. He's ambitious. And he talks about a history of people judging his family. And of course, that's when I was very interested in meeting Brett's family. I wanted to know, what is he referring to when he says, you know, people judge where he came from and they only see where he is at now. So of course, by the time Tiffany meets Brett's family, it's much later in the process. They're super close to the wedding. And I love that Brett was making a comparison between what he's experienced with Tiffany versus what he's experienced within his family when it comes to that verbal affirmation. He says, we don't talk about how we feel. And I love that his family didn't try to like gaslight him or convince him otherwise. They're like, you know, we're close in a certain way, but the words, we just don't share those words. So I love they were all able to be on the same page about that, because that means that if they wanted to change that, they can at least start from acknowledging that that is the reality of their relationships right now. And something like the bond that Brett is building with Tiffany, something where he's learning to be more verbally affirming and learning the power of the word love, for example. He can start sharing that with his family. He can start teaching his family how to love one another better, how to be more affirming, how to be more loving. That's the beauty of a solid, healthy relationship, is that when things are working really well within that relationship, you are gaining practice and learning new tools and skills to take into your other relationships. Your other relationships should not be compromised because you're in a good relationship. They should be strengthened. That's why I'm so big on the in-law relationships and the relationship with friends, because I think it's so beautiful when you can see the people that you love all get along. They have a bond, they have a relationship, and now we're all learning how to love one another better because of this new relationship in your life. It looks like Brett didn't meet Tiffany's dad until their wedding day, so that's even later in the process. Tiffany's dad, you could tell he doesn't play any games. He's like, I'm not going to go over the top with my emotion. I'm not going to be laughing and smiling, like he's deadpanning, but the things he's saying, he's like, you have my blessing. He's like, she feels the same way about you. Basically, what I'm hearing him say is, I trust my daughter's opinion. I may not know you, but I believe in her decision making. And for that reason, I support this. So that was a just beautiful moment, just warmed my heart. I love the way that Brett talked to him, because you know, it's a very untraditional process, and some parents, they're just not on board. They want that traditional, I know the person you're with, I had a say in you moving forward with them. And I love that Tiffany's father was able to let go of those expectations and just be supportive, the support that they both needed that day. So you guys know we didn't get any high-key drama with Brett and Tiffany. However, that's not to say that the opportunity for there to be high-key drama wasn't there. They just chose to more constructively discuss things, even something that, you know, we could perceive as small, like the water on the floor. Tiffany says she doesn't like water on the floor out of the shower. And she says, Brett's like, babe, it's just water. And she's like, you know what? That's my boo. This is something we're gonna have to work on. That is a healthy way of looking at that problem, because we all probably have experienced where something that objectively seems really small, we can magnify that, make it so big. We look at it as a reflection of, you don't care about my preferences. You don't respect me. You're fine with this floor getting soaking wet, right? And now it's a big argument. And it goes both ways, right? Tiffany's got to hold grace with Brett, who doesn't find this to be a big deal. And Brett has to be respectful of the fact that this might be something that's a bigger deal to Tiffany than it is to him. You negotiate a compromise. What does that look like? You know, okay, maybe we're going to get a huge bath mat that lines the whole shower. Those kinds of things where you can find resources to make something more livable and manageable, where somebody doesn't have to completely change how they're doing something, and you don't have to spend every single day like seething and being frustrated with these relatively minor things that do affect your daily life. So I do love that she was able to, even as she was talking about it, she was saying it with a smile. She wasn't taking it too seriously. And she's like, ultimately, this is my man. Like, so I'm going to figure out a way to work through this. Something that's not even addressed on the show is that one of them was living in Seattle and one of them was living in Portland, just like Chelsea and Kwame. But Tiffany's like, hey, I'm willing to move. I can see myself living here. She's like, there's a bit of a space issue. And I love how she's able to tease Brett and he doesn't take it personally. He's able to joke around. She calls him bougie Brett. For some people, if that is something that is offensive to them, you know, it could have become an issue. Again, a lot of things could have been issues. Teasing him, or if she felt insecure about him being so neat. I've seen this. People self-sabotage. They're like, this person's gonna think I'm messy or nasty. Instead, she's just like, yeah, you're neat, you're bougie. I'm not there, but I'm willing to make it work. Both of them talking about compromising. She's going to move and he's like, hey, if we need more space, I'll just get a bigger unit. That is not a problem. Like, they're both so invested in their future that they're talking about things in a way where it's going to happen. We're going to get married. We're going to live together. We're probably going to have to get a bigger space. Those little things are assurances of the future that your partner wants with you. You don't have to guess. You don't have to wonder what's going to happen. Talking about that, it communicates intentionality. It communicates purpose. You don't have to keep saying, I'm serious about this. I'm going to do this. You just show them we're making plans. That is enough to reassure someone who in any moment could have some doubts. I even love how Tiffany asks Brett, does this worry you? Like, I'm going to live here. And he's like, no. And you can see he's dead serious about that. The great thing about them is even if the answer was yes, right? If Tiffany said, does that make you have any doubts or make you scared? And if he was like, yeah, it does. I'm a little worried. I know because we've seen it. Tiffany would say, hey, your reservations are valid. Those fears are warranted. It's a big change. Or vice versa. If she's like, I'm willing to make this change, but it's really scary for me to move. And you know, this is your place. It's not my place. I'm a little worried about being able to create a life here. I think Brett would be like, hey, I can understand why that would be worrisome for you. And when the ultimate goal is to be in a healthy relationship, you figure out a way to tackle all these problems that are outside of your relationship. We're gonna work as a team and figure out a solution that works for us as a unit. The money conversation with Brett and Tiffany was so healthy. Again, things that could easily blow up was actually very well handled on both of their parts. So the first thing I love is that Tiffany opened it up with a question. She says, I'm very satisfied with how I spend my money and budget. How do you feel about how you do it? So she's not launching right into, I have assumptions about what you're doing. I have assumptions about what you need to be doing. She wants to know like, hey, there's a good chance he might be happy with it. Let's talk about that. There was a bit of a miscommunication there where she was basically trying to say, hey, I'm not going to police how you spend your money. I don't want anybody policing how I spend my money. Love that. Taking the empathetic stance, thinking, how would you feel if it was reversed? If he was saying that to you, saying, hey, I don't want anyone policing how I spend my money. As long as the bills are covered, I'm good. And Brett's like, okay, while we're talking about that, I'm fine splitting 75-25. And she turned around like, yeah, that's fine with me. So he thought she was saying that she wanted him to pay all of the bills. But all she was saying is, as long as our bills are paid, I am not going to police how you spend your money. I just want to make sure our bills are taken care of. So I loved that that was a moment that could have been a miscommunication that was quickly addressed. He's like, hey, I'm going to tell you what my boundary is. And she's like, I'm totally cool with that. They just talk about things in such a healthy way. So many of us are so used to, oh, this is the moment where it's going to turn into some drama. And it's like, skirt. Nope, no drama here. We're going to have a healthy discussion and walk away laughing. Because what she was really saying is like, I know that you are more comfortable spending money on like high-end things than I am. And the way she communicated that to him was, you have great taste. You have great style. So she's basically complimenting him. And I have to trust that but I also just want to make sure that what we're doing is within the budget that makes sense for our bills. So again, just beautiful communication, not being critical, just being observant. And then she even turns it into a learning opportunity, an open-ended question. What's the most expensive thing that you've ever gotten? And Brett, he's playing along with it. He's not getting defensive. He's not shutting down. He's not like, why do you want to know that? Or that's none of your business. Like, yeah, you know, I have some really expensive luggage. And when she was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it, he didn't take offense to that. He thought it was cute. He thought it was funny. This is what it looks like when you give your partner the benefit of the doubt. This is something I'm always emphasizing in my couples therapy sessions. If you believe your partner loves you, wants the best for you, and wants a future with you, why make the assumption that something they're saying is something with the intended purpose to hurt you? That should not even make sense with the person that you're choosing to spend your life with, or the person you've chosen as your person if you guys aren't married or talking about marriage. So giving your partner the benefit of the doubt, sure, they're teasing me, but they're not doing it to hurt my feelings. If there's a part of you that believes this person is doing it to hurt your feelings, you need to evaluate that relationship and the person that you're with. Maybe your intuition is telling you that they do want to hurt your feelings. Maybe this is a person that gets off on you having low self-esteem. And if that is not an indication that this is not the right relationship, this is not the right person, I really don't know what is. You guys, like, the scenes with Brett and Tiffany just warm my heart. This is what I would love to see, 5 couples like this on this show. And that would just be the best show ever for me. Even in the moments where Tiffany is experiencing stress and she's projecting it a little bit. She's like, are you feeling stress? You know, she said, I'm feeling anxious. And he's like, no. She wants to understand that. She said, how are you not feeling that stress? And the way he reassures her and says, because of you, he said, I see the future so clearly with you. This is the difference. From the very beginning, Brett said that he was dating with intention. He had a purpose. This is what that looks like. When you have intention, you have a purpose, you have a goal with the person in mind. You are not easily swayed because of another person's doubts or stressors. He has the space to help Tiffany when she's feeling anxious because he's grounded in the vision he has for them. That's what leadership looks like in partnership, is to be able to recognize that transition is tough. As a therapist, the first thing we're trained to look for is what is the most recent major transition you've experienced. Did you just move? Did you just have a baby? Did you just get engaged? What is the biggest stressor? Because that's usually going to be where we see acute symptoms. So being able to navigate transition in a way where you can see the end goal clearly is what he's saying. He's like, I know this part is stressful, but I see what's next for us and I know we're going to make it. That's what Tiffany needed to reel her back in. Again, they are never short on the verbal affirmations. One thing that I know is like a small little thing, but I thought that it was cute and a sign of health. When they were at the fittings and Tiffany sees Jackie's not there and she's like, ooh, let me tell Brett about this. Why do I think that's a good thing? That was such a good sign to me because that tells you right there, they're already developing such a friendship. You got some news, you want to immediately share it with your person. It's a really good sign because the strongest marriages and relationships I see, you do develop that certain relationship with your partner where they are your best friend. Now, I've heard some people kind of critique that and say your best friend shouldn't be your partner, or your best friend should be the people that you've been with before you met them. And I can understand that logic. I think you can have both. I'm not the kind of person that believes you can only have one best friend. I think you have friends who are the best friend for you in certain areas of your life. And I think a spouse should definitely be on that list because you guys are literally doing life together. So much of your decisions are made together that you want to feel like you can relate to someone as not only this person that you're building with, but also this person you can like relax and enjoy, laugh with, be your silliest version of yourself. The idea of marriage, husband, wife, it's a very serious concept, but I think the term friends really loosens up those expectations, and society can't tell you what your friendship is supposed to look like. So I loved that moment when she told him right away. It was like you kind of could tell they had the strongest connection because it doesn't look like any of the other ladies thought to text their partner about that. My favorite scene as a therapist. This is the scene where I was like, this is my favorite couple ever in Love is Blind history. It's the moment when Tiffany is so stressed and overwhelmed that girl is in the kitchen sniffing a candle that's not even lit just to try to calm down. At the dress fitting, Tiffany's mom made a few comments that I was kind of like, do you really want to say in front of all these strangers that you never thought your daughter was going to get married and all these things? But I was like, well, hey, Tiffany seemed to take it in stride, so maybe she didn't care. But it did make me think that, her mom might have a tendency of just saying whatever's on her mind, and in a setting where you're already having intense pressure and stress, things that might not have bothered you typically will probably start bothering you now. So I was wondering, as soon as she was saying that she was so overwhelmed and stressed in the kitchen, I was like, I wonder if this has anything to do with her mom. And then she talks to Brett and she said, having my mom in town and needing to get things from our bridesmaids dresses, I'm imagining that her mom probably has some control over who's invited, who's not, like typical things a mom does during a wedding. You can tell they have a good relationship, but my favorite thing was how Brett handled it. First thing, let's do a play-by-play. People like to see play-by-plays with sports. This is the kind of thing I like to watch over and over again for a play-by-play. First thing he does, he sees she's on the couch. He probably has some indication that she's having a hard day emotionally. He asks, may I join you? He doesn't just insert himself into the situation. Sometimes when we're having a bit of an emotional breakdown, we need that solitude. We don't want to talk. So I love that he asked for her consent for him to join her on the couch. He sits down and he puts his arms out. So firstly, he's giving her the physical reassurance. I'm holding you tight. I've got you physically. She says, I'm trying not to cry. He simply asks gently, how come? That communicates, I'm invested in hearing about what's happening with you emotionally. But I have seen on my couch in therapy where a person is like, oh, I'm trying not to cry. And the person goes, here we go again. Or they'll just be like, okay, yeah, you don't have to cry. Don't cry, it'll be okay. So they're more focused on keeping the tears from coming. So I love that he was genuinely invested in understanding why she was about to cry. She starts to open up to him about her stressors. What's his response? Validation. He says, this stuff that we're dealing with is a lot. It makes sense that you would feel this way, and it's okay to feel that way. She's crying into him, and he is okay with that. He's not like, oh, hold on, not on this shirt. Wait, are you wearing makeup? No. In that moment, the only thing he cares about is how can he provide emotional security for her. Then she goes as far as to say, I don't want a wedding. I have heard people say that. And the partner hears, I don't want to marry you. It's easy to have a misinterpretation of something like that. But I love Brett was like, I'm just here to listen. I want you to be able to vent and process. I think in his mind, he's like, I know this wedding is happening, but you are so stressed out that you wish that it weren't. And I can understand that. I can hold space for that. I'm not going to personalize that. Take this moment and make it about me. That is what I often see, is that when your partner is emotionally struggling, you take that personally and you think, I'm doing something wrong. How can I better support you? Well, what are you saying about me? And that person's emotional crisis, you might be involved in some way, but it's not about you. The best thing you can do to reassure them is to provide them with that open and safe space to process their own feelings. That's what we're doing as therapists. A lot of people think therapy is about giving somebody the answers, and very much it's not. It's really about helping a person understand the emotions they're having, identify the reason why they're having those emotions, and most often accepting them. It's not always about changing them. It's about accepting this is how you're feeling, and it's okay to feel this way. We put so much pressure on ourselves not to feel things that sometimes we lose the beauty in allowing ourselves to fully experience an emotion. So that is honestly my favorite Brett and Tiffany scene, because I don't think you could see as much emotional maturity on any scene ever seen on this show, or probably most of the other dating shows that we've ever seen. For Tiffany to be able to vocalize how she's feeling, he says, how are you doing? And she says, I'm not doing good. That is so honest, because it's so tempting to just be like, I'm fine, or it's just been an off day, but it'll be okay. She's like, I'm not doing good. She's giving him an opportunity to support her. Sometimes we get so protective about our negative feelings because we feel a sense of shame about them, that we don't even allow a person the opportunity to be that safe space for us. So they both showed so much emotional maturity in this scene. Brett and Tiffany, if you can't tell, they're kind of my favorite ever, but I think a lot of us are on the same page about how heartwarming it was to watch this love story unfold. Another thing I love that really showed emotional maturity is that Tiffany didn't transfer her stress to the relationship. She didn't say this relationship relationship is stressing me out. But I see this, that you're feeling this personal stress that you can't escape. And the very person that just happens to be around, that anger or frustration is displaced onto them. And then you make it so that you are angry with them or angry with the relationship instead of just being honest about the things that are actually frustrating you and using them as a resource to help you process those outside stressors. Again, when we talk about externalizing the problem, I think she beautifully did that. So I want to know, what did you all think about Brett being so frustrated about the tailoring of his pants? I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on it. I don't like to harp on what I consider to be relatively small things as a reflection of a person's character. That was a moment where I could see that Brett's a little bit more anal than maybe I thought. Even when Tiffany looks in his apartment and she's like, "You're so neat." You know, I think he's a pretty anal person. The reason why that characteristic might be missed is because he seems so all in with Tiffany and so uncritical of Tiffany that it doesn't seem like he's the type of person that is very meticulous and particular about what he looks like and likes. But you guys, this is his business. This is his field. He does not want to be embarrassed in front of coworkers, in front of his fiance, in an outfit that he is not proud of or excited about. And if he had the time, it's not like he was late. You know, his brother was kind of like more on the "you're being dramatic, over the top" end. But if that's not something that's important to his brother, that's just not something that's important to him. Brett definitely gets irritated with his brother. That's the first time I really see him have an attitude. But you know, that reminds me, there's this concept. So Murray Bowen, he is one of the founders of Marriage and Family Therapy. He has a model known as Bowen Family Therapy, where he talks about the multi-generational transmission process. I'm not going to nerd out on you guys too much. I already have several videos about Bowen, but he does have this concept that's called going home again, where it's basically encouraging your clients to go back home to situations that maybe they've been avoiding and try to experience their family members from a space of not being as emotionally reactive as they have been in the past. Kind of a level of distance between the person you were when this was your reality, your daily life, and dealing with these people, and the person you are now who's evolved and grown, but being in that same setting. It's kind of a good test to see your growth. What I saw in that moment between Brett and his brother is Brett being taken back to when he was younger, right? He and his brother having very different values, you know, maybe him being picked on a bit about how meticulous he is. These are things that I imagine he might have been picked on in the past. He said that growing up, he didn't have a lot of friends. And that one thing that he would do to deal with that is to just draw. So I imagine that the artist in him that's very particular about image and how things look, you know, from an aesthetic perspective, is probably something that was teased a lot. And ultimately, those things we're teased for a lot of times are the things that lead us to our greatest successes, because we're teased for them because they're different, they're unique. And so I thought that Brett's being very particular about how his pants looked, I didn't really think there was a problem with it. I personally hate seeing someone get so upset and so sharp with people who are there to support them, like his brother. But I do think it was kind of like an automatic response where he was probably falling into an old dynamic that they've had in the past. I'm sure he really probably didn't even like watching that scene back, honestly. He probably felt a little bit of shame, because no one wants to be caught on the days that they're irritable and frustrated with people that they love and care about. We've all had those moments. It just happened to be caught on camera. So I'm glad he was able to get his pants looking how he liked them to look. I don't hold this against him. It's like, if you're going to be meticulous about something, like, let it be pants. I love that he was extremely open and flexible to how Tiffany looked. He got lucky. He's got a gorgeous girl, but you know, it could be an opportunity for him to nitpick the aesthetic and things like that. So I was happy to see that in that regard, he was completely open and happy and embracing and accepting of the gift that he got with his partner. And if he's going to be really particular about something, I'm fine with it being pants on his wedding day. That was not a red flag to me. That is my review of Brett and Tiffany from Love is Blind season 4. If you can't tell already, I absolutely love this couple. This was a great couple to just show a bunch of green flags, the things that we can be working toward. You know, I can point out the bad things people are doing, but sometimes we need to actually see it demonstrated, what that looks like on the positive end. This is a solution to the problem you're having with communication. This was a couple I could see being very intentional and using great strategies to ensure a healthy relationship, and it was very great to watch that, and I wish the best for them. They're one of those couples where if it doesn't work out, I will be heartbroken. I will be absolutely heartbroken. heartbroken. I'm so invested in their story. So let me know what you all think about this breakdown, what you think about the couple, and what should we do next? We're at the end of our breakdown of the couples on this season of Love is Blind, and I want to start getting some other content out for you all. Are you interested in vlogs? Are you interested in any particular films or movies I could break down? Are you interested in maybe having some relational things addressed, just some videos about communication or anything? You guys have the best ideas, and I'm looking at all of them, cataloging them. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. For those of you who are here in the live chat, I love chatting with you all. Thank you so much for meeting me here live and hanging out. I appreciate you for watching this video all the way until the end. You definitely didn't have to, so thank you, thank you, thank you.